Hello everyone, this is Ben the Penman with probably the first sequel video on the channel. Today I'll be working more on the Supercell Make Clash of Clans scenery submission. For more info, I'll link Supercell Make in the description and my first video where I did some planning, but the basic idea is that Supercell is having a contest to develop a Clash-O-Ween home scenery, and this is my entry. So, today I'm going to be making 3D models and renders I'll be using to make my submission. As a reminder, it's due on the 31st of July, so if you're wanting to make your own, you only have about 2 weeks left. The Clash of Clans developers actually use a lot of 3D modeling in development, despite the fact everything was 2D sprites for a long time. They've always made 3D models of their assets and used renders of them for sprites, so I decided to try and match that style. I'd break out my old Blender knowledge and try to make some 3D assets for my entry. I'm not planning on doing as much work in Blender as I think Supercell does. I'm sure they get into textures and put in more detail than I plan to. I'm just planning on taking what I have, importing it to Krita, and painting in the details. That video is coming soon, but today I'll just be showing you my work in Blender. What I'm doing right here is pretty basic, just moving around shapes to try and texture the sheer drop-off into my River of the Dead, which is what I've decided to name my submission. I want the quote-unquote water to be mostly transparent, so the texture of the cliff faces is pretty important. And here I'm getting into some more complex modeling, unlike the resizing in places of blocks I've been doing up until now. Here I'm trying to make a floating island. If you want to know more about Blender, there are probably many more qualified teachers than me, but I'll try and explain what I'm doing. There are multiple modes in Blender. The two I use today are the layout and modeling mode. In the layout mode, you can see the different shapes in your scene, move them around, and even resize them. But you can't change the individual vertices of the shapes, or meshes as we call them. That's what we use the modeling mode for. In the modeling mode, you can move individual vertices, edges, or faces, and you can even add more. That's how you make more interesting shapes. Since it's easier to use what I already have than make a new shape for every bump on the coastline, you'll see me copying the floating island and placing it around to give the shore of the River of the Dead more variety, so it actually looks like a river. After that, I'm going to make a few other models that I think we need to finish this, and I'll show you my process for making a bridge. Basically, I started by stretching a cube to make it plank-shaped, then duplicated it to make all of the planks. After that, we need some longer ones to go under the planks, and then I'll use some cylinders to make the little sticks that hold it up. Forgive my lack of knowledge in bridge building lingo. Also, I'm not really going to be using this as a bridge. I'm going to be using it as a pier, so forgive me for misnaming the files and whatnot. If you're curious about me adding color, I'm going the basic route. I'm just going to use materials. If I wasn't planning on adding detail in Krita, I'd probably want to use a texture, which is a bit complicated to explain to people who don't know much about 3D modeling, but basically a texture is an image that gets wrapped around a mesh to color it. Material just colors everything the same way. Texture is way better, but ain't nobody got time for that. Also, to make the bridge look more rickety, I'm gonna realign some of the planks so they don't look so perfect. And this is the camera, which we use to make renders. Renders are basically just 2D images of a 3D model. Clash of Clans uses a camera type called orthographic, which basically just means that unlike in the real world, things further away aren't bigger, like we're used to. So I have to change my camera to that style before I can make a useful render. I also made a fun little shack model off camera. I did some renders earlier but forgot to turn the camera to orthographic, so I'm just going to take them really quick and then we'll go back to the full scenery so we can look at everything I made today and put it together. As you can see, I also made some cliffs in the background. My goal here isn't to make everything, but the basic shape of the land so I can paint over it in Krita. I added in a shack on the island and another in the background. I also added in the pier for the boat to moor on. Those aren't the only things I'm adding in, but there are better resources for everything else. And here you can see the background image I used to make sure that everything lines up. By the way, I just added the shacks and the pier in to get a look at the whole thing together. I'm not actually going to put them in the final render, so I'm just going to move them to the side when I take it. I'm going to import their separate renders into Krita so I can adjust them as necessary. So after a few more touch-ups, you'll be able to see here is what I have at the moment for my 3D models that I'm going to use in making my submission to the Clash of Clans Supercell Make campaign. I'm going to import these into Krita and use them to pull the whole thing together in the next episode. So that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll get right back to work finishing this up so you guys can see my final submission. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.